Today we will take a look at direct and indirect characterization. So characterization is used to better help you understand the personality of a character. This week, we're going to be digging deeper into direct and indirect characterization. As we study characterization this week, I want you to focus on these essential questions. How do I use direct characterization and indirect characterization to analyze and understand characters in a story? What is the difference between direct and indirect characterization? And what does STILL stand for? And how do I use it to analyze characters in a story? So STILL is actually an acronym, and you're going to be learning what each of those letters stand for when working with indirect characterization. So we will be digging deeper and looking at the acronym STILL, which is an easy way for you to remember how to analyze characters indirectly. So I'd like for you to have your notebook ready to take notes and pause the video at any time, and you can watch it as often as you need to. So have you seen this anchor chart before? I know that you've been learning about characters since kindergarten. This chart may have been used to teach you what characters are like on the inside and on the outside. We're now actually going to be deepening your understanding of who characters are and how authors use characterization to help readers understand the characters in a text. So, characterization is the process by which the writer reveals the personality of a character. This can be done in two different ways, and it's important that you write these down: direct characterization and indirect characterization. And as we're going through our lessons, you need to make sure that you understand the absolute difference between the two of those. And I'm going to share with you the difference between the two on today. So, direct characterization is when the author tells the reader what the character is like. I know we've been talking about showing, not telling, and the difference in the two. So, direct characterization deals with the author telling, and indirect actually deals with the author showing. So, when an author uses direct characterization, they're actually giving you the character traits word for word. So, word for word, you're able to read the character trait. For example, Ben was the bravest boy in the history of Sanders. So, here the writer will directly state that Ben was the bravest boy, and so we know that Ben is brave. You don't have to guess, you don't have to infer, because the writer is telling us directly that Ben is brave. So, here's another example. The patient boy and quiet girl were both well-mannered and did not disobey their mother. So we can see in this sentence that the writer is directly telling us the personality of the two kids. The boy is described as patient, while the girl is said to be quiet. This is direct characterization because the author is directly telling us the personality of the two kids. On the other hand, is indirect characterization. So it's when the author shows the reader what the character is like instead of telling. For example, Ben barely flinched as his arm scraped the broken glass window. Can you imagine? And pulled the baby from the burning car to safety. I can tell from this sentence that if Ben barely flinched, he didn't even think twice about it. Like, he just did it. A character trait that I would use to describe Ben would be brave, because based on what the author is saying, Ben doesn't think twice. He simply does what he needs to do to save the baby from the burning car. He's doing something that would take a brave person to do. So, brave could be a word used to describe Ben. So, we can use the acronym STILL. STEAL. And this helps us to remember the different ways that we can indirectly understand characters when the author is showing us instead of telling us. So the S stands for speech, or what the character says. The T stands for thoughts, or what the character is thinking. The E is their effect on others. A for actions, and L for their looks. So now let us take a look at each of these. The first letter is S for speech or for says. A character's words can show us a lot about who they really are. How they speak to others can reveal a lot about their feelings. So we have to pay close attention when we're reading. Pay attention to what a character is saying and how they're saying it. So let's take a look at this example. It's not due until tomorrow. I have plenty of time to write my essay. I'll do it after this show or maybe after dinner. Later, Mom, for sure. By listening to what this character is saying, I can tell that they have an assignment due and they know it's due tomorrow. But what they're telling their mom is that they have plenty of time to get it done. Telling mom, like, don't worry, I'll get it. Maybe after the show or maybe after dinner. I promise I'll do it. So what the character is doing is procrastinating. They're putting off what they could do now for later. They're not focused on what they need to get done. Therefore, two traits that I will use to describe the character are procrastinator and unfocused. Now, I'm going to give you a chance to try one. What trait would you use to describe this character? And actually, I want you to write down your thinking in your notebook. Whatever word comes to your mind that you will use to describe the character in this particular example, I want you to write it down. Then you're going to pause the video and you're going to come back, and then I'm going to share with you what my thinking is, and I want you to compare it. So here's the example. Are you okay, Sam? Is there anything I can bring you? So what I want you to do is I want you to take a minute and think. I want you to pause the video, think about it, write your response in your notebook, and then I want you to come back and I'm going to share my thinking. So welcome back. So two character traits that I would use would be thoughtful and caring. So now you may not have used those exact words, and that's okay, but hopefully you chose traits that mean the same thing. So this character, if someone is checking and asking to find out how Sam is doing and then asking if they can bring him something, that tells us this person is obviously thoughtful and caring. So now we're going to move on to T, thoughts or thinking. So T stands for thought, so what the character thinks. The character's thoughts and feelings show us what's going on in their mind. Their thoughts and feelings can reveal a lot about their personality. So we're going to look at an example of thoughts and thinking. Coach chose him to start over me? That's just a joke. There go our chances of taking home the trophy. So we can learn that this character is obviously sitting on the sideline. And we can tell that they're upset because the coach picked someone over him to start. They are thinking that the coach made a silly decision and that the decision is going to cost them the game, and not only the game, but also winning the trophy. This shows us that this character thinks that he's a better player, and it shows that he is selfish and conceited. He's only thinking about himself. They're only thinking about themselves, and they're saying that really they're the reason for the success of the team. Now I'm going to give you another chance to try one with the T, thinking. Remember, I want you to write down your thinking in your notebook, pause, and then come back and hear what my thoughts are, and you can compare the two. So here's the example. My throat closed and I could feel the tears swelling up in my eyes. This can't be happening, I silently screamed. Now, based on this information, I want you to ask yourself, what trait would you use to describe this character? Pause the video lesson, and then I want you to take a minute, think, write down what your response is, and then come back, and I'm going to share my thinking. So, okay, this one is a bit different. The character here is upset, but they're upset to the point of tears welling up in their eyes. I'm wondering if maybe they're embarrassed by something, because they actually say this can't be happening. I would actually use the character traits upset and maybe even embarrassed to describe this character. All right, let's move on to E, effect on others. This is actually how a character makes others feel. This tells us a lot about them as a person. The effect can be good or positive, or it can actually be bad or negative. So here's an example. Anytime there was a group project, the class wanted to have Kayla in their group. They knew that with her in their group, an A was almost guaranteed. So we see here that everyone wants Kayla in their group because they knew that if she was in their group, they were going to get a good grade, and usually they were going to get an A. So we can infer from this that Kayla is obviously very smart and that she's probably a really good hard worker. So we can describe her as smart and hardworking. So let's take the time to look at another example. And then based on this information, I want you to write down a character trait to describe Brian. So here's the example. And remember, I want you to pause, write down your thinking, and then come back to the video. Here's the example. When Brian walked onto the basketball court, the other team groaned and their coach began nervously biting his fingernails. So I want you to think about it. What character trait would you use to describe Brian? Pause the video, think about it, jot down your answer, and then come back. So here I can tell that everyone is obviously not happy because they groan and the coach is nervous enough that he's biting his nails. All of this is because Brian walks onto the basketball court. So I can infer that Brian is possibly very aggressive or a rough player. The coach may be nervous thinking that Brian may hurt someone while they're playing. So I can infer that Brian can be described, or I can use the character traits of aggressive or competitive to describe Brian based on the information and how he is affecting others. Okay, so let's move on to A for actions. So what does the character do and how does the character do it? This can help us understand how to make judgments and inferences about them. The actions can reveal the attitudes and feelings of the characters. So here's an example. When Matt thought the store clerk wasn't looking, he grabbed the Snickers bar and slid it quickly into his pocket. So Matt does something when he thinks that no one is watching, especially the clerk. He's sneaky. Matt even puts a Snickers candy bar in his pocket. This shows that Matt is a thief. We can describe Matt as being sneaky, dishonest, and a thief. Now it's your turn. Remember, I want you to read through the example, try it on your own, think about it, write it in your notebook, and then come back to the video. Reva smiled and slid half of her sandwich across the lunch table to the new girl whose mother had forgotten to pack her a lunch. Think about it. Jot down what you would use, what character trait you would choose to describe Reva, and come back. So Reva notices that the new student does not have any lunch to eat. So she shares half of her sandwich. Now we can easily infer that Reva is kind, she is caring, and she's generous. Why? Because she's willing to share her lunch. Matter of fact, not just any of her lunch, she shares half of her sandwich. So this gives us clues about who Reva is, her personality, based on her actions and what she does. So the last letter of Steele is L, and it stands for looks. So what does the character look like? How do they dress? Their appearance really shows us a lot about them. What kind of clothes are they wearing? Are they dressed in a uniform? We can learn about their interests, their hobbies, maybe even a job, whether they're rich, maybe they're poor. We can learn a lot about a character just from how an author describes their looks. We are studying what they look like. So, for example, the scar from the accident made a jagged path from her mouth to her ear, but Joan never covered it up or apologized for it. She wore the symbol of survival proudly. So here we learn that Joan has a scar from her mouth to her ear, and she never tries to hide it. She actually wears it very proudly. This shows us that Joan is confident. It shows us that she is proud, and it shows us that she is a survivor. So now I want you to try one on your own. Think about what Gordon looks like in this example. And then you're going to pause the video, write down your thinking, choose a character trait to describe him, and then come back to the video. Gordon was rarely seen without sneakers on his feet, a duffel bag for practice slung over his shoulder, and a giant bottle of Gatorade in his hand. Can't you just see that? Now, as you're imagining that in your mind, how would you describe Gordon? What character traits would you use? I want you to write it in your notebook, pause this video, come back, and then you'll hear my thinking. So obviously, Gordon is very athletic. He wears sneakers all the time. He keeps a duffel bag ready for practice and a bottle of Gatorade. So his looks, this gives us clues about who Gordon is as a character, and it helps us learn about his personality. So the character trait that I use to describe Gordon is athletic. And we're almost at the end of our lesson, and I want you to actually pause here and quiz yourself. So I want you to think about it. What do those letters in the acronym STILL stand for? What does the S, the T, the E, the A, and the L? In your notebook, I want you to write these letters down, just like you see them on this slide. And then I want you to write down what each of the letters stand for. Now, I understand you may not get all of these correct today, and it's okay because we're learning. But I want you to take a minute, pause the video, write down what you can remember, and then come back to check your answers. All right, so now it's time to check your answers. So for S, you could have written either the word says or you could have written the word speech. Both of them are correct. T, thinks or thoughts. You could use either one. E, effect on others. A, actions. And L, looks. Now, if you've gotten any of these wrong, it's okay. What I want you to do is correct it in your notebook and be sure to study so that you can learn from this. We will be using this strategy a lot this year, so it's important that you get a good understanding of what each one of these letters are used for. So take the time to study today, and we'll continue to work on these throughout the year.